Among the hardest emails I receive as a rabbi are those telling me that yet another swastika has been discovered at a peninsula school. Like me, parents are horrified, worried, and yet I hear from our Jewish students that they are almost used to this regular stream of anti-Semitic symbolism in their places of learning. How can it be that in 2025, this is normal? In David Nirenberg's book, Anti-Judaism, he argues that one way anti-Semitism is different from other forms of hatred is how the Jew can become a symbolic opponent or representative of really anything that's wrong in our world at any particular moment. It operates as an insidious, cancerous conspiracy theory rooted in tropes and lies around Jewish control and power. And so it's not surprising that in a moment where American democracy itself is at risk, Jews once again find ourselves caught in the middle of a strained, divided nation. Whether it's a shooting of Israeli embassy workers in DC, violence at a rally to free the hostages in Boulder, an arson attack on Governor Josh Shapiro's home hours after a Passover Seder, or swastikas painted on high schools right here in San Mateo. Anti-Israel sentiments and anti-Semitism seem to spout from all directions. Fringe actors, right-wing pundits, neo-Nazis, and left-wing activists alike. There's a particular loneliness in being a Jew right now. No one else fully understands our relationship with Israel, the pain of our trauma, or the depth of our history. Too often, leaders fail to take seriously real acts of anti-Semitism. Swastikas dismissed as graffiti, or Jewish professors asked to use Israel as a litmus test for their ability to teach unrelated subjects. No wonder some of us think twice before wearing a Magen David necklace, or even before walking into High Holy Day services. And yet, we're here. We showed up, and this alone is an act of hope. Jewish wisdom teaches that fear can be transformed into courage. Proverbs tells us the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and this wisdom becomes our moral compass. In Exodus, when Pharaoh first makes a decree that Jewish males should be drowned in the river Nile, the Egyptian midwives Shifra and Puah defied Pharaoh. We read in the Torah, it was because they feared God. Their fear was not paralyzing. It empowered them to save Jewish babies at birth, Moses included. Fear of God allowed them to face the fear of Pharaoh. Fear of God created moral courage. This is the Jewish move, to take the fear that could crush us and transform it into action, into wisdom, into life. Right now, I fear for American democracy. For 2,000 years, Jewish life in the diaspora has rarely flourished as it has in the United States. American democracy has given us space to build synagogues, schools, businesses, cultural institutions, and gain political influence. But that flourishing depends on democracy's survival. We see cracks in the very foundations of our system. When government agents can round up immigrants without due process, democracy is shattering for us all. We should be disgusted at the treatment of immigrants alone. Of course, many of us are immigrants ourselves, or identify, in addition to being Jewish, as people of color, LGBTQ, disabled, or any other vulnerable person in this time. Jews pay particular attention to the treatment of other minorities in America. Aaron Dorfman, executive director of the Jewish Partnership for Democracy, cautions us. If a president can deny rights to immigrants today, then tomorrow a president could deny rights to Jews. But anti-Semitism. We must never tolerate anti-Semitism. And there are voices who would trade away democratic principles and care for the vulnerable in the name of Jewish safety. Some Jews support leaders who are eroding democratic norms because they felt those leaders are better allies to Israel or tougher against anti-Semitic threats. But this is dangerous because Jewish safety and democracy are intertwined. The tension between our democratic rights and anti-Semitism bubbled over as campus protests towards the war against Hamas presented major issues of safety for Jewish students. I heard from you, parents who feared for the safety of your own children. And I additionally heard from some of you that your students were joining in, or that you would have too. Anger at Israel's behavior in this war has made some Jewish voices see themselves as partners in these protests. So is this anti-Semitism? Well, it's challenging because multiple things can be true at once. Some critics of the protests were conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism, and many protests contained actual instances of anti-Semitism, hate speech, and violence. Some Jewish students were unsafe because of the behavior of protesters, and some protesters were Jewish themselves and acting out values of peace, dignity, and tikkun olam. And some protesters of all backgrounds were unsafe when universities called the police to silence them. Overall, there was a failure of universities to provide a coherent response that protected Jewish safety and the First Amendment. But even for Jews, it is sometimes hard to name what is anti-Semitism and what is not. Rabbi Jill Jacobs, rabbinic leader of Teruah, reminds us, Israel, like any nation, can and should be criticized. That can include criticism of the Israeli government, Israeli officials, the IDF, including conduct during the current war. But when anger at Israeli policy spills over into harassment or violence against Jews, well, that's anti-Semitism. When people justify or celebrate the deaths of Israeli Jews, or attack diaspora Jews because of our relationship to Israel, that's anti-Semitism. The phrase "Free Palestine" might not be anti-Semitic on its own, as an expression of solidarity or hopes of a statehood, but shouting it at a group of Jews, or spray painting it on a Jewish cultural space like Manny's in San Francisco, certainly is. Jews are not only a religion, we are a people with a history, a homeland, and a kinship with Jews worldwide. Our concern for Israel is not politics, it's identity. And being called a Zionist as a code word for Jew, or referring to Israel as a Zionist entity instead of the lawfully created country it is anti-Semitic. And another way that the line between anti-Israel sentiments and anti-Semitism is blurry. None of it makes Jews feel safe. But when charges of anti-Semitism are lobbed against virtually any criticism of Israel, we aren't helping the fight for our safety here in the USA or helping Israel be the best we want it to be. Crackdowns on legitimate free speech, silencing critical voices, even detention and deportation of students are happening while the fight against anti-Semitism is used as a Trojan horse. Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, argues that targeting anti-Israel protesters undermines free speech and due process, even if it is framed as protecting Jews. He said, "No one should minimize the hateful, violent acts committed against Jewish students. But if we sacrifice our constitutional freedoms in the pursuit of security, we undermine the very foundation of the diverse, pluralistic society we seek to defend." Our government's response was the creation of a task force to combat anti-Semitism. Yet what we've seen the task force do is use their authority to withhold federal dollars from universities. And that has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, especially when the funding cut is for research in areas of technology, science, or agriculture. Leo Terrell, the chair of the task force, has made his goal pretty clear. We are suing every one of these universities guilty of anti-Semitism. We're going to bankrupt these universities. We're going to take away every single federal dollar. The president of Wesleyan University, Michael Roth, counters. The idea that you are attacking anti-Semitism by attacking universities is a complete charade. We are seeing anti-Semitism used as an excuse for getting universities to show deference to our administration by curtailing the free speech, academic rigor, and scientific curiosity that are at the heart of both the American university system and Talmudic thinking too, by the way. This is not Jewish safety. This is authoritarianism in disguise. And we should know. In Nazi Germany, silencing speech was a first step towards Jewish persecution. Speaking of Jewish persecution, the chair of this task force for Jewish safety, claiming to protect Jews, has also openly shared that Mein Kampf is a favorite book, has publicly wished America had a leader more like Hitler, has retweeted the opinions of a neo-Nazi who marched in Charlottesville, called Jewish politicians Palestinian as a slur if they criticized Israel, and called security costs at Jewish institutions Jewish taxes. It is absurd to imagine that our safety can be ensured and our pain can be remedied by those who share ideas objectively dangerous to Jews. We should be terrified of a long-term authoritarian agenda. Yehuda Kurtzner of the Shalom Hartman Institute reminds us, our flourishing in America is tied to the same democratic principles that protect all minorities. If we trade away those for short-term safety, we erode the very foundations that have enabled Jewish life here. Free speech protects us, but more than that, it allows us to contribute Jewish wisdom to the public sphere. From Emma Lazarus, whose poetry gave voice to immigrants, to Heschel marching with Dr. King for civil rights, to Gloria Steinem speaking for women's rights, free speech has let Jewish voices shape a more just society. Instead, we're becoming accustomed to authoritarian advancement as overwhelming cruelty becomes normalized. In just a year, here are some highlights of democracy's systematic dismantling. South Korean workers, here legally in the country, were detained by ICE in a holding cell for over 72 hours, forced to lick water off the floor. Gay makeup artist from Venezuela was falsely accused of gang connections and sent to a mega prison in El Salvador with no trial. The coercion of the media through cut funding and lawsuits, talk show hosts canceled in government-coerced censorship. And Mahmoud Khalil, detained for sharing his anti-Israel opinions about the war in Gaza at Columbia University, but detained nonetheless. None of this is normal. And as long as we get used to it, it becomes acceptable. Amy Spittelnick of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs warns that stakes for Jewish safety could not be higher. She explains how the very programs that are proven to keep Jews safe and all vulnerable communities have been systematically undermined. Title VI protections in schools and campuses are cut. Hate crime prevention grants are decimated. Even nonprofit security grants, a reason PTBE can safely gather this evening, were first frozen and are now being politicized by new conditions from the Department of Homeland Security. Those conditions effectively demand that synagogues, churches, mosques choose between our physical security and our core values. Either cooperate with ICE or ban illegal DEI. We don't even know what illegal DEI means yet. But in a community like ours, it could mean anything from hosting an LGBTQ affinity group, which we have, to supporting Jews of color, which we do, to standing with immigrant neighbors, which we value. This is the false choice being presented: safety or values, security or freedom. As Jews, we know this is no choice at all. The Jewish community can walk and chew gum at the same time. We must not become so self-concerned with our own challenges that we forget our moral compass. Jewish safety cannot be built by weaponizing the very fabric of our democracy, nor by pitting us against other vulnerable groups. True safety comes when we protect both our bodies and our beliefs, when we can be openly Jewish without compromising the values at the heart of Judaism. Safety must be a whole picture. Historian Anne Applebaum writes, democracies always demanded things from citizens: participation, argument, effort, struggle. They always required some tolerance for cacophony and chaos, as well as some willingness to push back at the people who create cacophony and chaos. So what do? We do what Jews have always done. We turn our pain and our fear into courage. Returning to Torah, it is symbolic that as midwives, Shifra and Puah's refusal to obey Pharaoh is what leads to the collective birthing of the people of Israel. It is their first and only act of disobedience which lights the spark of courage and defiance in others, including Moses' own mother, which sets the stage for the eventual defeat of Pharaoh by the Israelites. Fearing God, rather than any political authority of the day, Shifra and Puah are rewarded for their insistence on life over death. The Talmud says it was the reward of the righteous women of that generation that caused Israel to be redeemed from Egypt. We learn from these righteous women that answering the call of justice at any expense has been at the heart of Judaism since its inception. Judaism has a central commitment to challenging the status quo with the hope that things can always be better. What are our own acts of courage and defiance? It starts as easy as Jewish pride. Rabbi Diana Fursko, in her book, We Need to Talk About Anti-Semitism, teaches us, if you are Jewish and want to fight anti-Semitism, do something Jewish, anything. Consider public pride as an act of defiance. Go out into this world and wear your Jewish star necklace. Show off your Hebrew tattoo. Wear a yellow ribbon for hostages. And put your menorah in your window for all to see. Be visibly, outwardly Jewish. But it can't stay there. We must recognize anti-Semitism, call it out, document it, and report it. Continue to talk to your children's teachers and principals and college presidents about what makes your students actually safe. If you need support, your clergy and our local JCRC have tools to help us learn to best use our voices for the protection of our people. We also organize. Decisions about anti-Semitism at a federal level should not be made by those without Jewish best interest in mind. Our community recently supported AB 715, a bill to protect Jewish students and all students against discrimination here in California without compromising free speech. We must also push for expanded funding for Title VI in the Office of Civil Rights. We must restore the hate crimes prevention grants that have been cut. Our voices must speak to our representatives and let them know what Jews believe is good for our own community. And we act in solidarity. We can't do this work alone. We must refuse to let anti-Semitism or our relationship to Israel pit us against others who are allies. We have to acknowledge that rising anti-Semitism is part of a broader rise in hate targeting other groups too. As the Torah teaches, we must speak for the stranger, the orphan, the widow. Translated from biblical speech, that means we stand with queer communities, with Muslims, with people of color, with immigrants, with anyone vulnerable. Not if they are anti-Semitic, but even if they're critical of Israel. To be Jewish in America today is to bear witness to injustice towards all Americans, because isolation breeds fear, but relationships cultivate resilience, and democracy depends on our voices being part of a chorus. And what about when we disagree? In 1927, Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis had an answer. The remedy to be applied is more speech, not enforced silence. So we must continue to strengthen our community right here at home. PTBE must be a place where we reject the false binaries of extremism that seek to pit us against one another, and instead speak with one another. The Jewish people make up a large tent, differing on politics and Israel. But here at PTBE, we strive to be a community built on sacred relationships. It happens in the Oneg line, being greeted with a Shabbat Shalom. It happens on our adult retreat at Camp Newman, staying up late, affirming our personal stories. You can save the date, April 3rd through 5th. It happens in Torah study, sharing ideas about life and ultimate meaning. It happens at a Shiva Minyan, showing up with bagels to say, I see you as you grieve. It's a child's laughter at Rishonim, in the prayers lifted up by Cantor Ilana, in the leadership you offer and the time and energy you share. PTBE illustrates what Jewish safety looks like. Not fear, but belonging. Not silence, but song. Not isolation, but community. Building human relationships really does help us conquer fear together. And finally, we do not lose hope. We remember our long history of challenging injustice, from Shifra and Pua to the marches in the streets of Tel Aviv today. Jewish stories have hope as their ending. For the Jewish people, redemption is never lost. So anti-Semitism, it's back. It never really left. And facing it is hard. But on this Yom Kippur, may we transform our fear into courage and our fear into hope. May we embrace complexity and nuance in the fabric of a healthy society and recommit to being those who speak up, Jews who strengthen democracy by our very presence. Gemar Chatima Tova, a good inscription.